Welcome back to another explainer. All right, picture this. You're settling into a plush, velvet cushioned seat right in the front row for literally the most spectacular, pathetic theatrical tragedy ever staged. For this story, I want you to think of me as the king's shadow. You know, that cynical, darkly amused observer standing in the corner who had the absolute pleasure of watching a masterclass in monumental arrogance unfold. We're looking at a graphic novel fable known as The Comedy of the Void King, and trust me on this, the punchline is gonna sting. Okay, let's dive into this. There's a fundamental rule of power in this universe, and it's pretty simple. Power is a ghost that flees when chased too loudly. Our so-called protagonist was a second apprentice who decided, hey, he wanted the throne. But to get it, and more importantly to hold it, he systematically erased his own humanity. He literally hollowed himself out, thinking that stripping away all his emotion would make him untouchable. But in this desperate, incredibly loud chase for absolute control, he completely forgot that fundamental rule. Act 1. The Illusion of the Pristine Throne. Let's take a look at how this apprentice constructed his magnificent, yet honestly, utterly fragile, illusion of control. So he rebrands himself. He becomes the pristine authority. No more crowns for this guy. He's now just a silent void wrapped in silk. He became an empty vessel of pure utility. And, from my spot in the shadows, it was just fascinating to watch. He actually thought that by shedding his humanity, he had elevated himself to this godlike status, like he was a detached observer above it all. He didn't realize he was just setting the stage for his own downfall, basically scripting a play where he was the absolute only one who didn't know it was a comedy. And this brilliantly illustrates his next fatal step. To lock down this absolute, unquestionable control, the new king sets his sights on the Spire of Chaos. Now, this wasn't just a tower, it was a literal cosmic prison. And inside it were two untamable spirits of pure, raw nature, known as the Hunger and the Small. The king, in his infinite, hollow wisdom, decides that to truly prove his dominance, he needed to leverage these forces. He literally wanted to put nature itself on a leash. Which brings us to Act 2, the fatal mistake of rigid binding. This is where the king's calculated arrogance pushes him to literally forge his own doom. To pull this off, he digs up this forbidden script of ancient, rigid magic. He spends just unimaginable resources forging these perfectly straight, supposedly unbreakable geometric chains. Picture this guy, this emotionless void, sweating over perfectly drawn squares and triangles, desperately trying to project a commanding posture as he attempts to bind the Spire of Chaos. It is the ultimate image of an overly serious bureaucrat trying to, slap a parking ticket on a hurricane. So, the crucial point is that the king was operating under a catastrophic delusion. He looks at chaos and sees what? A structural defect? A messy mistake in the universe that just needed to be neatly tied up and leashed by his geometry? But reality dictates that chaos is a foundational pillar of existence. You don't chain it, you survive it. Rigid control always, and I mean always, shatters when it meets the raw, unpredictable force of natural chaos. And look, I tried to warn him. As the king's shadow, my entire gig was manipulating human narcissism. I knew exactly how to use ego against people. But nature? Nature possesses no ego to mirror. You can't flatter a tidal wave, right? You can't outsmart an earthquake with strategic humility. The Hunger and the Small didn't have fragile little egos for me to manipulate. My usual tricks were entirely useless, and the king's rigid magic was about to meet an enemy that simply did not care about his authority. Act 3, the Cosmic Punchline. Get ready, because those perfect, orderly geometric shapes are about to turn into a completely messy, chaotic ruin. The king stands there, chest out, activating his grand binding ritual, fully expecting an epic, world-shaking battle of wills. He's ready for thunder, lightning, the whole shebang. Instead, the spirits just laugh. Literally, it takes only moments. With effortless, casual mockery, the Hunger and the Small just tear apart the geometric foundations of the throne, the court, the entire kingdom. Picture kids pulling apart intricately folded paper toys. That was his kingdom to them, just paper. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sheer condescension from the spirits. Listen to this. An amusing theatrical performance, little king, but the script is terribly rigid. Man, they didn't see a conqueror. They saw a clown. They treated his supreme display of absolute power as a mildly entertaining, maybe slightly boring magic trick. the sharp, biting reality is that the king wasn't in a battle. He was just the opening act for a comedy show he didn't even realize he was starring in. Finally, Act 4, The Discarded Prop. The grand play wraps up, but definitely not with a bang. It ends with a dark, deeply ironic whimper. Honestly, the spirit's amusement didn't even last that long. They quickly grew bored of his desperate attempts to maintain that commanding posture. Now, if he had fought a traditional war, he might have been granted a noble warrior's execution. But no way, the spirits denied him even that dignity. They just tossed him aside into the rubble of his paper kingdom like garbage. He wasn't a vanquished foe. He was literally just a broken stage prop from a play they were already tired of watching. Let's move to the finale and see how this builds to the void exposed. The ultimate irony here is just beautiful in its darkness. Remember how he shed his humanity to become a vessel of pure utility? Well, when the spirit stripped away his kingdom, his magic, and all his illusions, that is exactly what was left. Nothing. He became a literal empty shell, thoroughly and completely ruined by the unyielding weight of his own calculated arrogance. He erased himself to gain everything and ended up exactly as what he became. A void. And that brings me to you, watching this right now. It's super easy to laugh at the Void King, but where in your own life are you acting just like him? Where are you frantically trying to put perfect geometric chains on the natural, unpredictable chaos of your life, your career, or your relationships? Are you shedding your own humanity just to maintain an illusion of control? Remember the fable of the shattered spire, because if you try to leash the hurricane, you might just find yourself tossed aside like a paper toy. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.